January 25th, 1967. South Ashburnham, Massachusetts. The lights go out in a farmhouse kitchen, and what walks through the closed door afterward will take Betty Andreasson 10 years and 14 hypnosis sessions to fully remember. What follows is one of the most thoroughly investigated UFO abduction cases. A 528-page report, 2 lie detector tests, a 12-month investigation. And it's also one of the strangest, because Betty didn't just describe aliens or NHI. She described angels, a phoenix, and a book she wasn't allowed to open. This is the Andreasson Affair. And by the end of this 2-part episode, you'll understand why researchers consider this one of the most important and one of the most theologically strange UFO abduction encounters in the history of ufology. Betty Andreasson was also a talented artist, and she drew many pictures of her abduction experience. This is the first time, as far as I'm aware, that her drawings are being brought to life using modern AI. I'm Tim Stone. I'm a lawyer and author in New York. And if you enjoy these deep dives into UFO cases, please be sure to hit like and subscribe. Betty Andreasson grew up on a small Massachusetts farm. She married James Andreasson in 1954. By 1967, the couple had 7 children and had taken over the family farmhouse in South Ashburnham, a rural town of rolling hills. Betty was 34, a devout Christian, living with her parents in that farmhouse. On the evening of January 25th, 1967, her kids were doing what kids did most nights back then, watching Bozo the Clown in the living room. Her 3-year-old, Cindy, was curled up on her grandmother's lap. Betty was in the kitchen finishing chores. Then the lights began to flicker. And then the lights went out completely. A pink light appeared in the kitchen window. Then it turned reddish orange, and it was pulsating. Here's how Betty described it under hypnosis a decade later. Suddenly the lights were off, and we wondered, what was it? I can see like a light, sort of pink right now, and now the light is getting brighter. It's reddish orange, and it's pulsating. She told the kids to be quiet, to get into the living room. She said it felt like the whole house had gone still, like a vacuum had settled over it. Her daughter Becky, 11 at the time, looked down the hallway toward the kitchen and saw a dark shape moving in front of the light. Then everything went black. Becky, her grandfather, and the rest of the family, all frozen, unable to move, unaware of anything else happening around them. Only Betty could still see. Only Betty could still act. Betty wasn't the only witness. Her father, he glimpsed them too, through the pantry window, momentarily before the paralysis took hold. He compared them to Halloween costumes. He saw them out in the yard, hopping, one after another, like grasshoppers. A very odd description. When investigators asked her what was happening, this is what Betty said in real time under hypnosis. There's beings standing there, and they're talking with me, but not with their mouths. They've got big heads. 5 entities, 4 of them identical, about 4 feet tall. A 5th, the leader, about a foot taller. And they didn't open the door. They came in like follow the leader. They are starting to come in through the door now, right through the wood, one after the other. Not through the frame, through the solid wood itself, as if it wasn't there at all. Betty's own first instinct wasn't fear of aliens. It was theology. I'm thinking they must be angels, because Jesus was able to walk through doors and walls and walk on water. Entertain the stranger, for it may be angels unaware. That framework, angels, not ET, would shape how Betty Andreasson interpreted almost everything that happened to her that night. Under hypnosis, Betty sketched what she saw with notable precision. Large, wraparound, cat-like eyes, gray, clay-like skin, holes where a nose and ears would be, a fixed, scar-like mouth. The beings wore dark blue, form-fitting uniforms, each with an emblem on the left sleeve, a bird with outstretched wings. Their 3-fingered hands were gloved. Her daughter, Becky, questioned separately under her own hypnosis session, independently described almost the exact same details. Marble-like eyes, a head like an upside-down pear, a mouth that was just a wrinkle in gray, clay-like skin. That corroboration between mother and daughter was one of the reasons why investigators, decades ago, took this case so seriously. Before she ever left the house, Betty describes a strange, quiet exchange with the leader, whose name, she said, was Kazga. At one point, she picked up her family Bible from the end table and held it out to him. He took it, and in its place handed her a small, thin blue book, one she wasn't allowed to open. Betty also resisted, at least at first. She asked the beings silently and out loud whether they came from God, and pushed back against the idea of simply following them. The being's answer, repeated calmly and more than once, was some version of, they'd come to help and asked her to trust them. Betty describes feeling a kind of pull she couldn't fully resist. Not violent, but not quite her own free choice either. The leader told Betty to stand directly behind him. What happened next, she could only describe with one word: suction. I swooped in somehow, like suction, and immediately I was going through the same thing, the wood that they were. She wasn't walking anymore. She was floating, several inches above the ground, matching the swooping rhythm of the beings ahead of her. My legs feel strange. My whole body does. It feels like it's weightless. Very funny. Outside, resting on its own struts in her backyard, was an oval object with a raised central portion. The legs of the vehicle appeared to physically adjust to the slope of the hill as it settled. Betty stood there awestruck, and by her own account, afraid. Kazga seemed to sense it, and did something investigators bring up as one of the case's stranger, quieter details. See, you can trust me. Look over at the ship, he told her. And the bottom of the craft turned transparent. Betty said she could see straight through it. What she saw looked almost like plumbing built from glass. Spinning wheels, large glass spheres, something she guessed caused the craft's pulsating lights to shift between red, blue, green, and white. She had no framework for any of it, and admitted as much. A doorway opened automatically, and Betty stepped through. Inside was a strange, curved space, what Betty called the half-bubble. Weightless, disorienting, her arms and legs feeling asleep and icy at the same time. Waiting for her there was Kazga. From the entrance hall, Betty was led up a spiral staircase. She counted several levels, doors that opened and closed with no visible seams. One level with what looked almost like a black hole at its base. Partway up, she passed something like a black, mirror-like object, rimmed in red light, standing between two of the silent beings. That led to a domed room lined with unfamiliar controls, raised buttons, symbols she had no name for, something like a coiled golden cord. Betty tried to describe it all to investigators and kept apologizing for how little vocabulary she had for what she was looking at. This is a recurring theme throughout the account. Betty's not embellishing. She's straining to describe machinery in the vocabulary available to her, the vocabulary of a housewife in Massachusetts in 1967. A hatch opened beneath her. a honeycomb patterned opening, unlike anything she could compare to ordinary technology. Betty asked, understandably, if whatever came next was going to hurt. It is just to cleanse you. That's what the being told her. She was lowered slowly into a narrow tube on a small platform, and dazzling white light closed in around her from every side. The book describes her feeling almost engulfed in it, but not in pain. Afterward, Kazga led her to a small room and asked her, repeatedly and politely, to change into a white garment waiting there. Betty resisted at first, embarrassed, before eventually undressing and stepping into it herself. Would you please change? The entity asked her. Betty protested. He simply repeated it, patient, unmoving, until she gave in. It's a strange, almost domestic detail to fixate upon in the middle of an abduction experience. Betty described the garment itself in oddly specific terms: thin, smooth, almost like it had been poured and dried rather than woven, sealed at the seams, with slits down both sides. What she entered next was a large, dome-shaped room. No corners, light coming from everywhere at once, with no visible source. Very large, very high over my head. It closes in on you. One thing worth flagging is that this stretch of the experience was so distressing for Betty, so traumatic, that the hypnotist changed his technique. Instead of having Betty relive the experience as a participant, he had her describe it as if she were an outside observer, watching the scene unfold. Two beings stood over her, dressed alike, in shining white and silver, except one was noticeably taller. Betty found herself on an elongated table she couldn't say she'd climbed onto herself. She simply became aware she was there. This is the chapter investigators return to again and again. A silver, needle-like instrument was inserted at her navel. When she asked what it was for, the answer she got back was garbled and incomplete. Something about creation. Nothing more specific than that. It's an interesting detail that Betty had a hysterectomy years earlier. So the being's comment about creation fits squarely in that realm. Next came a strange, funnel-shaped instrument the being said was there to measure her for light. Then a second needle into her nose. Betty said it felt like breaking through some kind of thin membrane, and the pain was sudden and severe. "It's hurting," she cried out. Kazga placed his hand on her forehead, and, by Betty's account, the pain eased almost immediately. "Thank you," she said softly, once it passed. Later, debriefing her, the investigators asked Betty how the pain had actually stopped. She couldn't explain the mechanism, only that the being touched her forehead, and that seemed to be enough. From there, Betty was led out with Kazga and two other beings through a long, dim passage. She compared it, more than once, to an underground subway corridor, with something floating above her, like it was running along a track. The corridor led out into a long, cylindrical chamber, a row of strange, glass-like seats lining each side, lights swiveling gently overhead. The beings asked Betty, politely, to sit. "Would you please be seated?" one asked. Betty didn't feel she had much choice, but she said yes anyway. Their polite requests created an illusion of free will, but in reality, her wishes always corresponded with their choice. A clear, molded seat closed around her. Heavier than glass, she thought, maybe plastic, and cold. She said it felt like moisture was being drawn out of her, right through the seat. This is one of the points where Betty reliving this experience under hypnosis, got visibly distressed. Her hypnotist at that point, he stepped in to calm her down, slow things down, and remind her that she was only recounting this as an outside observer looking on. The entities told her tubes would be sealed into her mouth and nostrils, not to hurt her, to keep her from drowning. You won't drown, they told her. Just keep your eyes closed and your body will be fine. Terror set in anyway. Then a gray, syrupy liquid began seeping in through the tube at her mouth. Oh, this feels good. Tastes sweet. Oh, I feel so relaxed. Just like a whirlpool. Whatever it was, it worked fast. A tranquilizing, pulsing sensation. Her whole body going loose, heavy, then lighter again as the fluid drained away. When she opened her eyes, she was somewhere else entirely, dressed now, along with the beings around her, in shining silver suits, each with a black hood pulled low over the face. They moved together through a dark tunnel, its walls chipped and rough, she said, like a coal mine. The only light came from the alien suits themselves, faintly glowing in the dark. Ahead, the tunnel curved upward towards something mirror-like blocking the way, a silvery, glass-like membrane. The group didn't slow down. They passed straight through it, without any resistance at all. On the other side, the atmosphere itself had turned red. Not lit red, Betty insisted, but vibrating, almost pulsing with the color. Square, stucco-like buildings lined a black track, and crawling over them were creatures she could only compare to lemurs or monkeys, thin-limbed, headless-looking, with eyes on the tips of stalks that moved independently of each other. They're scary. They can climb up and around and in and out of windows. The creatures gaped at Betty and her escorts. The creatures were agitated, crying out among themselves. The track swept them forward again toward a second circular membrane, and just like the first, they passed through it without resistance. On the other side, the red was gone. The atmosphere had turned green. Betty said this new place was vast and beautiful in a way that seemed to overwhelm her senses. Strange plants, mist-shrouded structures in the distance. She'd later compare it, groping for a reference point, to something like a legendary underground kingdom. It's so beautiful here. This new area was so vast. Ahead of her, a skyline built from crystalline pyramids, faceted like cut glass, catching rainbow light across their surfaces. One, she said, was different from the rest. A single flat, white-edged face tapering to a point. One pyramid with a white edge. Another was stranger still, its apex crowned with a sculpted head, half Egyptian, half something else. Betty struggled for the right word, landing eventually on a kind of feminine-masculine combination, like a sphinx. It looked sort of like an Egyptian head, a regular head, how they wear those hats. Giant prisms hung in the air around the pyramids, scattering color in every direction. Betty called it starkly, almost frighteningly beautiful. And ahead of that, something appeared that stopped her entirely. Bright light, prisms scattering rainbow color, and slowly, a shape beginning to take form in front of it. We're going to leave Betty right there for now, standing in front of a light, watching a shape she can't yet identify start to resolve. What comes next is the emotional center of the entire account. It's a vision so intense, it left all the investigators in the room in tears. So we'll save that for part 2. This has been Catskill Liminal Walk, and I'll see you next time.